This is a brief video lecture on Aristotle's accounts of friendship in the Nicomachean Ethics, Book 8. Aristotle says that friendship is any association of people who spend time and do things together, who share in pains and pleasures, and wish for each other's good. In some way or another, a friend is someone who is literally part of your life, that they share in the pains and pleasures for you. They feel for you. They have sympathy. You have empathy for one another. You care about the other person in a similar way to how you would care about yourself. And sometimes you might even sacrifice yourself for the sake of the other person, because of who they are and what they mean to you, how they help constitute your life. Aristotle says that friendships are necessary for life. He thinks no one would choose to live without friends, even if they had all the rest of the good things. So even if they were a billionaire, even if they had all the joys of life except for friendship, they would still choose to live a life without friends. He says, and in both poverty and other misfortunes, people believe that friends are the only refuge. The idea is that when you are suffering, when you are at your least best, when you're at your worst, you go to friends. You seek the help from friends. In some way, they understand you. In some way, they are your conscience when you are lacking one. They are your reason when you're lacking reason. And they're your comfort when you lack comfort. Friends are this kind of support structure for you living the good life. Friendship is also natural. Aristotle's example of this is that the kind of relation that parents have to their offspring is a kind of friendship. Now, it's not the kind of friendship, of course, that two lovers might have. It's not the kind of friendship that maybe best friends would have sometimes. But it is the kind of friendship in the sense that you care for the other person. You care for their well-being. They're a part of your life, and you desire their company. Now, of course, in this case with offspring, though, there's also an element of paternalism that would be lacking most often with other kinds of friendships. Aristotle also mentions that in the case of justice and friendship, friendship doesn't need justice. He says, when people are friends, there is no need of justice. But when they are just, there is still need of friendship. And among things that are just, what inclines toward friendship seems to be most just of all. That if one has friends, you don't need the concept of justice if you're with your friends, if they're truly your friend, and you have a virtuous friendship, as we'll see, because you would never do something to them that would require justice. Instead, though, if you have justice but you lack friends, you are still in need of friendship. Justice on its own is not enough, because there is another kind of value that is found in friendship that aids one in the pursuit of the good life. Now, there are kinds of friendships that one can have that are based on use and based on pleasure. These are kind of friendships of vice. A friendship that is based on use is one that you're friends with only because of the kind of utility that they bring. Perhaps you're friends with that person because they know some people that can help you in pursuit of advancing in your career. Perhaps you're friends with that person merely because they give you money. Perhaps you're friends with that person merely because you go over to their house and they have resources you can use. In that case, you're not really a friend with that person for the sake of who they are, but for what you gain from them. Likewise, a friendship based on pleasure is a vice because you were only friends with them because of the pleasure that they bring to you. Perhaps you always laugh around them, but when they're in need, you don't actually come and help them because you don't really care about them. You only care about the benefit of pleasure that you receive from them. Aristotle says, those who love for what is useful have a liking based on what is good to themselves, and those who love for pleasure have a liking based on what is pleasant to themselves. And the other person is loved not for what he is, but insofar as he is useful or pleasant. In these kinds of friendship, we see that there is no kind of self-sufficiency that the virtuous person would be seeking. These are the kinds of friendships that people who lack virtue would be engaged in. Now, this actually doesn't mean that a virtuous person would lack friends that they have solely based on use or pleasure. In fact, Aristotle thinks it's almost impossible to not have some kinds of friendships that are based on use or pleasure. The difference is that the mark of a virtuous person has friends in a virtuous way. A virtuous friendship is based on virtue. It involves mutual recognition. It's non-competitive. It does actually include pleasure and utility, but you're not friends with them for the sake of gaining pleasure or utility. That friend is your kind of other self. So your sense of self, is expanded. A friendship based on virtue is a kind of friendship where you value them for their own sake. And out of that mutual, so the other person as well has to value you in the same way. You can't value that other person for their own sake, for who they are, but they only are friends with you because of the use they get from you or the pleasure they get from you. It must be mutual. And when it is mutual, you achieve this kind of self-sufficiency. This kind of a friendship for Aristotle is a mark between the means of egoism and altruism. It kind of bridges the gap because it's not the case that you're only friends with them because you care about yourself, but it's also not the case that you're only friends with them because you care about them. So it's not a selfless concern for the other. There's a meeting in the middle where both become the same. So Aristotle says, the complete sort of friendship is that between people who are good and are alike in virtue, since they wish for good things for one another in the same way insofar as they are good, and they are good in themselves. And those who wish for good things for their friends for their own sake are friends most of all, since they are that way for themselves incidentally and not accidentally. So the friendship of these people lasts as long as they are good and virtue is enduring. So friendship is important because of this kind of infrastructure that it helps build for the good life. That when you are friends with that other person, you expand your ability to care. You expand your ability, actually, to develop greater sense, to learn from the other. It's the similar case that we have, for example, in maybe Plato's Phaedrus, where part of the pursuit of philosophy, part of the pursuit of truth involves friendship with another person. That it is through your friendship together, through this mutual pursuit of the good. That's the only way you can be a philosopher. That's the only way you can pursue the truth. It requires a kind of love and care for others. Now, how is it possible that one can develop virtuous friendships? It's not possible in any circumstance. In fact, if you were in a war-torn region, it would be very difficult to have virtuous friendships if they weren't already established prior to that living in that war-torn region. For example, if we're thinking of Thomas Hobbes' State of Nature and the war of all against all, this kind of virtuous friendship would be impossible. At the end of the Nicomachean Ethics, in Book 10, we get an account of why politics is so important for the pursuit of the good life. Now, again, to live the good life is not to just pursue politics, but there's a way that politics sets up the kind of background requirements to live the good life. Aristotle's account of the good city, the best possible city, the best possible civil society, is based on 4 causes, very similar to any other account of the nature of anything else that Aristotle would give. So you have a material cause, where you have a particular population in a given territory. You have a formal cause, which would be the constitution, the kind of formal components that comprise the way the city is structured. You have the efficient cause, who brings about and regulates and acts upon the constitution, the ruler, or the lawgiver, or the politicians. And what is the point of doing all this? The final cause is to enable the good life, or eudaimonia. The purpose of government is to ensure the flourishing of the virtues and the establishment of the good life among its citizens. So there's this kind of dialectic between the politics and the Nicomachean ethics, between ethical philosophy and political philosophy. The point of politics is to enable the pursuit of the good life. But you cannot pursue the good life if you don't have a good political foundation. These philosophical pursuits, these texts of Aristotle's, go hand in hand. One is not privileged over the other. And it's only in understanding the dialectical relation between the two that one can begin to pursue the good life.